On Dr. Dady.
Chris Kenyon says he's fine with that, Mr. Allen.
Thank you.
Hi, Jody. We're going to start in a minute.
Hi, Dr. Ulmer.
Hi, Robert.
Hello, how are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you? I gotta turn the lights on.
Oh, I'm doing well.
We are live, Mr. Allen.
Okay. All right. We'll call to order the Monday, May 10th regular meeting of the Jersey Shore Area School Board. Can we have a roll call, please, Mr. Enders?
Mr. Becker.
Here.
Mr. Brungard. Here. Mrs. Grant, are you muted?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't hear my name. I'm here.
Mr. Kinley?
Here.
Mrs. Petrosky?
Here.
Mrs. Stemler?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
Mr. Allen?
Here.
All 9 members present.
All right, thank you. And at this time, if we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and if everyone else would mute their mics, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Ulmer, do we have any communications?
Nothing for this evening.
All right, moving on to the president's report. The first thing, I'm not sure whether a lot of you knew about this, but last week the AP Calculus was supposed to take their final exam on the day that we had to close our buildings, and the students and teachers and administrators kind of did an all hands effort to make arrangements to have that AP calculus test done on the date that it was scheduled. And all the students took their final in the maintenance garage. So kudos to the students for bringing it to the attention of the administration, and kudos to the administration and all the rest of the participants in making that happen. Everybody from the administrators to the maintenance staff, I think, had to do with transporting desks and setting everything up so the students could get their test done at the appropriate date. So thank you.
If I may butt in there for a second, I apologize. I'd just like to offer my personal thanks to all the administration and the maintenance staff and everyone who worked to let us have that test on that day. That means the world to us, especially in AP Calculus. Our rescheduled date would have been, 3 weeks out, and that would have just set all of our plans. This is the end of the year. We all have things going on, and the preparation for those AP exams really isn't easy. There's a lot of work involved in that, and it takes a lot of time out of our days to prepare for those. So having that additional preparation time and trying to do all the other end of the year activities would have been very difficult. So on behalf of the calculus class and even myself, who I'm part of that class, I'd like to thank everyone involved in helping set that up for us. It was greatly appreciated.
And I just want to add that not only was Robert and his class able to take calculus, we did English language arts the next day and AP US history the following day. So we got all three done when they were supposed to be scheduled.
Okay, and at this time, I'd like to propose that we add a motion to personnel as item H. And I'd be looking for a motion to recommend approval of a contract renewal for Dr. Dady at a base salary of $121,500, a 5-year term with future salary adjustments solely at the discretion of the board. So could I have a motion, please?
So moved, Mary.
Second, Wayne.
Any discussion or comment?
This is just to add it to the agenda.
Correct. Okay, hearing no discussion, could we have a roll call, Mr. Enders?
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Ms. Stobler,
Yes.
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Kinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That's all I had for President's report. Intermediate report.
I don't have anything to report. My meeting will be next Wednesday.
Thank you, Mrs. Petrosky.
Mr. Allen,
Student
for the
representative.
record,
Yes.
Mr. Allen, for the record, I did not notate the announcement of the executive session.
Yes, you're correct, Ben. Thank you. The board had an executive session for legal and personnel purposes prior to the regular meeting this evening. Student representative report.
This evening, nothing under my report. Although coming up here under the superintendent's report, I'll be displaying some information under item B. So, but for my report this evening, nothing.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
I'm going to start by recognizing Mr. Dan Robinson. Dan is a custodian at the high school. He is our April employee of the month, because April ended. I do want to point out that Dan was nominated by his colleagues in the high school, particularly because of a situation that happened earlier this school year. I think it was back in March. We had a female student in the high school who had a ring stuck on her finger at the end of the school day, and it was Dan Robinson who flew into action and was able to remove it. I can tell you, for those present, that was pretty traumatic for that child and the nurse, but it was Dan Robinson who was able to get that situation under control, and that's why he was nominated for Employee of the Month. And I got to go see him today at the end of the day to give him his award, and he's very grateful. So if you see Dan, thank him. There are 5 policies on the agenda for me to present this evening. I will ask you to look at those and ask questions now or later if you have them. 319 and 320 are simply PSBA edits. The Title I policy that is on the agenda, that is titled Comparability of Services, that is required for federal programs. Federal programs requirements. We have to have that comparability of services policy now. One of the things we did talk about prior the equity policy, but I want you to take a look at this comparability of services policy, because I think even though it's specific to Title I dollars and federal programs dollars, it does give us some good language about equitability of services that I think we could use as an overall equity policy language. This one is very specific to the services we provide to students and how they need to be equitable across all of our buildings. And this policy language is required because you take federal programs dollars. Policy 800.1 and 816 are new policies that are suggestions from PSBA, and they are very specific to our dealings with COVID and you giving permission for things like electronic signatures on documents. So all 5 of those policies are attached tonight to my report. If you have suggestions or questions about them, feel free to let me know before the next meeting when they will be back on for a first read. And tonight we have with us, you heard Robert say he was going to be presenting a little bit. We also have Jody English with us, one of our high school teachers who leads the Youth Development Task Force portion of the Jersey Shore part of that. We also have Dr. Dady, who is going to present some data along with those 2 people to talk about our student learning loss. We had a conversation at the board level a couple months ago about how deep our learning loss was. And I promised you I was going to look for some of into our data and compare back to what we had mid-year last year before we left, before schools closed, and compare that to where we were this year. So we had to have a little bit of time till we got to that data point. And then Dr. Dady put some of that data together. But as that was happening, Jody English came forward with a survey from the Youth Development Task Force, who actually started a conversation with students about what they felt like they lost due to COVID. So what you're going to hear is not just the academic data tonight that Dr. Dady is going to present, but you're also going to hear from Robert and you're going to hear from Mrs. English about what students said about their learning loss. So Dr. Dady.
I just need to wait for him to make me a presenter. Hold on. And I told Jody she wasn't required to speak. She is very welcome to towards the end, and that's why she's on here, especially if there's questions. So I appreciate Jody joining us here. So just hold on a second, and I will pull this up. Can you see my thing yet? There. Now can you see it?
Yep.
Yes. All right. Okay, so what we will be looking at here initially is the learning loss, and from back in March 13th. And so what we tried to compare is how did kids normally score at the beginning of the year compared to the beginning of the year this past year. And we'll be able to look at some other data points later because we couldn't use PSSA data, we couldn't use Keystone data, we couldn't use some of those things that we typically would use to see how kids are growing or how well they're achieving on those standardized type tests because they did not occur. So the data that we used in this part, the quantitative data at the elementary level, we used a cadence. Some of you may know that as DIBELS. We used the reading and math, and we compared the initial sweep from 2019 to the initial sweep of 2020. So 2019 sweep being before COVID hit, and 2020 would compare to where they came in when we were off from March 13th to the end of the year. At the secondary level, they don't do a cadence. We only do a cadence or DIBELS up to 5th grade. So for 6th through 12th grade, we use CDTs. Now, what you have to understand is CDTs are diagnostic tests. They're not really used to measure achievement so much as they are to look at how well are they progressing towards what they have to know that year. So when you see the CDT test, you may say, wow, those percentages of people at benchmark are really low both years. But part of that is because they're saying, okay, how much of, for example, that 6th grade information do they know in September, for example? Well, probably not a whole lot, but what we tried to do is, all right, well, let's compare those 2 data points and see, was there a big difference in one year to the next, even though the students were remote for March, April, and May. So this is the elementary cadence data from September of both years, and you can see reading and math there. And what you can actually see from kindergarten is that this past September, the percentage of students that were at benchmark was actually higher than the previous years. Now, one of the things that I would remember, you're not comparing the same kid, you're just comparing relatively how are kids coming in. This is probably a very good tribute to pre-K centers, parents still working with their kids, because they did a really good job and those kids came in a little higher than they did in the previous year. Where we saw, I will tell you, one of the places we saw the biggest, whether you want to call it learning loss, drop, or whatever, is in 1st grade. So that had been the 2021 1st grade reading percentage. That would have been last year's kindergartners. So it does make sense possibly that, all right, where we're seeing the biggest gap is in those students that were in kindergarten last year, almost, our youngest students, and especially in the area of reading. Now, math, there wasn't nearly as significant as a drop as in reading. In 2nd grade, actually, the reading was a little bit lower, but not a lot. In the 2nd grade, and in math, it was actually a little higher. In 3rd grade, you can see there was a small drop in each, both within 10%. In 4th grade, reading, actually, they came in a little higher this year than the previous year, and math a little bit lower. The other big drop, I said the one was in 1st grade reading. The other bigger difference we saw was in 5th grade reading. So you can see that there was a 19% drop of the proficiency of kids at benchmark, or the percentage of kids at benchmark. Math wasn't nearly as big. At the secondary level, looking at fall CDTs at the middle school, you can see in ELA, there was almost the same scores. I had to double check these because I thought, well, I must have accidentally pulled the same data twice, but that wasn't the case. Just ironically, from 6th grade both years and 7th grade both years, they had the exact same percentage of students at benchmark. In 8th grade, it was a little bit lower. And in math, there were slight changes, but again, all within 10%. At the secondary level, this was rather ironic. Actually, the lit and science scores, when they took the CDTs, were much higher this past fall than they were the year before. It was algebra was a little lower, but you can see, especially in lit, there was an 18% increase of students at benchmark, and in science, it was 36% increase. So just looking at the data a little bit there, obviously the most concerning areas were in 1st grade reading and 5th grade reading. But some of the grade level percentages were higher than previous years, the 2 most significant ones being in lit and bio. Almost all areas, though, were within 10 percentage points or less. Now, when you're looking at this, you have to remember that a lot of our kids did a great job at staying engaged even from March to June, when they're just learning to do some of their check-ins and everything remotely with the teachers. But also remember that the teachers planned during that time in closing the gap. In other words, how are we going to address the topics that we weren't able to cover from March to May? How are we going to do that at the beginning of the year? And from what I see in some of this as well, even though these tests probably took place about the time they were doing some of that, but they obviously did a really good job trying to keep their students engaged and trying to make sure they covered those things at the very beginning of the year that maybe the students didn't get at the end. Plus, you have to remember that some of the grade levels as well, some of that time that they lost between March and May was Keystone, NOCD, PSSA testing time that would not have had to make up instruction during those times. So when we learned that the Youth Development Task Force was doing the survey, that's when Mrs. English and I began talking and go, you know what's really important here? We're not seeing these great gaps that maybe some anticipated in the quantitative data, and looking at learning loss or achievement drop or things like that, especially when you look across the board, K to 12. So what is it that the students actually believe that they lost? What did they feel that impacted them the most during this pandemic? And so it's very possible the qualitative data may prove to be more useful in the loss of students. And what better way to know all of that than to actually go to the source, which is what the Youth Development Task Force did. What we heard from the students shows a much more significant perspective that I really believe that we need to take time to analyze and look at and see what role do we play in helping address those areas. And a lot of our teachers and some of the things we're doing, we're already helping to try to address some of those things. But this is where I'm going to turn it over to Robert. I am going to take this presentation down and put his up. So Robert,
question for you, Dr. Dady.
Sure.
Those benchmark numbers were at the beginning of the year or midterm of the year?
No, they were fall numbers.
Those are fall numbers. Okay.
Right, because not everything was done mid-year. So we took what we knew in regards to, okay, we know this is how they've come in at the beginning of the year from the previous year. So we took the very beginning of the year this year as well, because we had all the data to be able to compare for that. And of course, they didn't do an end of year either last year because we weren't here to do that.
Sure. Because it'd also be interesting to see how we've made up ground.
Sure. What would be really good, and this is just my opinion, especially when you talk about trying to address those areas that weren't there, is comparing. For example, we could take data from a couple of years ago and compare it to the end of year data this year, and again see relatively how many kids ended up on benchmark by the end of the year.
There are certainly multiple layers to the discussion, and I thank you for the interesting information. Very good.
All right, Robert, I will start this slideshow for you, and just kind of give me a cue when you're, just say next or something when you're ready to move on.
Sure, yep. All right, good evening, everybody. This presentation is on behalf of the Youth Development Task Force. They're an organization that exists countywide and like Cumming County, and there's also an organization at our school. I'm personally not a member. However, on behalf of the organization this evening and as the student representative, I'm going to be going over this presentation that they put together, which really goes over some of what they did in this data collection that they went over and getting some of the student perspective. As you can read, the purpose is continuously support, monitor, work, and raise awareness on mental and physical health issues of Lycoming County youth. So this is an organization, they're really concerned with the mental well-being of our students in the entire county. It's important that we look at these type of things because students are more than just numbers and data points and things like that. It's really important to have those things. However, they're also thinking and breathing human beings that have problems, and global pandemics affect them in different ways than just their grades and things like that. And that's the major reason why this organization wanted to come to the school board this evening. Of course, their mission is results driven, so they want to see change made and students living better lives and having better mental health and well-being. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So these are some of the questions that you're going to be seeing these members of YDTF going over in the following presentation. After this, there is a video that's going to be played. I'll read these questions to you. So the first is, during the pandemic, what are the things that you feel you've lost? The next, during the pandemic, what are the ways that you have seen yourself grow or learn new things? What would you like to gain from your experience? What has the pandemic taught you about other people, and how has it made you look different at our society? And how has the pandemic experience made you reevaluate your future? And yep, there's one more here. And then finally, many adults in education right now are focused on the idea of learning loss. They think that kids are falling behind academically during the pandemic. What do you want those adults to know about you and your experience during the pandemic? So one important thing to note is, as I mentioned, YDTF is a county-wide organization. So we're actually going to be looking at two different sets of information. There were, in a sense, two different, it was sort of a similar survey in a sense, but we're looking at two different groups of information. The first one that you see on the current slide, those are county-wide responses broken down by the districts. As you can see, a good portion of those 42% are from Jersey Shore. Those grade levels are going to be 7th grade through 12th grade. That is more of a uniformed way of looking at it because of how the other districts in our area organize their grade levels and whatnot. Like here we have 6 through 12, with the middle school being 6th grade and then ending at 12th grade in high school. Some of the other schools, organize it a bit differently, 7 through 12. So they just decided to make it uniform and do 7 through 12. And here's those were the responses by the grade level. And as you can see, it was actually a pretty even distribution of grade level responses. So the information you're going to see this evening is very well representative of the different grade levels and how they're impacted. So the information that you're going to be seeing, since of course we are the Jersey Shore Area School District, we're going to be looking at Jersey Shore's responses specifically. Now, as I mentioned, our school, we look at, we have the middle school and the high school starting at 6th grade. So they decided to go with 6th grade being that starting point for the information that you're going to see this evening. That's not to say that the countywide information isn't important. It's just for the well-being of our students in our district, we have the most control of how we can benefit our students more than we can in other districts. So those questions that I read to you previously, they're going to be gone over by the students you see here. Question 1 is going to be looked at by Olivia Snook, who's a junior at the high school. Question 2 by Aubrey Schilling, a senior. Question 3 by Olivia Miller, a freshman. Question 4 by Brianna Corlew, a sophomore. And then question 5 by Lee Springman, a senior. Those students worked very, very hard on those presentations that you're going to see. And on behalf of the student body, I would like to thank those students this evening just for putting themselves out there and representing the student body in our interests. That takes a lot of courage and a lot of hard work, and their time and effort is very commendable. And again, on behalf of the student body, I'd like to thank them. So before we get into this presentation, it's just important to focus on relationships and help students feel connected. Those are some of the things that the YDTF was really trying to think about when they were going over this presentation. And finally, the initiatives to prioritize mental health and wellness. Again, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, that is one of the major goals of the organization itself, is improving student lives, health, well-being, wellness, mental priorities, and things like that. Without further ado, we're going to go into the video presentation now. And I believe, is Dr. Dady displaying that, or Dr. Ulmer?
No, the technology department has control of it now.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
My name is Olivia Snook, and for the YATF survey, I chose the question, during the pandemic, what are things you feel like you've lost? I searched for 737 responses to understand how students grades 6 through 12 feel. Most teachers, and just adults for that matter, have the idea of learning loss stuck in their brain. As I was searching through the data, I looked for any response that included the words education, knowledge, or something along those lines. And I'm kind of a math girl, so I put this in an easy way for anyone to understand. 14% of students feel like they've lost their education. 14. That leaves 86% of students with completely different views from this pandemic. Many lost motivation and friends. Many others felt like they've lost the ability to have fun. A quote I noticed and had stuck out to me was that literally every high school experience has been ruined and the school doesn't care at all. While I don't completely agree with the part that mentions the school doesn't care at all, I agree with the point that they are making. The student cares for their high school moments that they want to be able to look back on and remember in the future. But the idea I get from this response is that the school is only focusing on one thing, and that's education. We are teenagers. We feel many emotions, and this pandemic has not made it easy on any of us. We constantly have things changing around us, and we're trying to do our best to keep up with it. Students are upset at the fact that they're losing some education along the way. They're concerned for their childhoods. You only get your middle and high school experiences once, and many students feel like they've lost all of those. I personally missed out on a lot this year too. I missed my junior prom, I missed school club activities, and even just be able to go to football and basketball games. I just haven't felt the same since the beginning of March of last year. While education is very important, so is our mental well-being, and many students just need something to look forward to and make them feel something again.
Hi, I'm Aubrey Schilling. I'm a senior. I'm Key Club president, and I've also been a part of YDTF for 3 years, and I had question number 2. Question number 2 was, during the pandemic, what are the ways you have seen yourself grow and learn new things? What would you like to gain from your experience? During the pandemic, students learned new hobbies. They gained family time, confidence and independence in themselves, skills and technology from being online, physical and mental growth by putting time into their body, patience, self-love, and a whole new perspective. During the pandemic, students learned a lot. We learned new hobbies, learned a lot about ourselves and our families, and we learned a lot about technology. Being online taught us how to use a computer better, and being by ourselves taught us how to love ourselves better. A lot of us took time and really got a good view on who we are and who we want to be. We put the responses into a word cloud, and what we got back was time. What everyone got from the pandemic was time. We got time with our families, time to grow, time at home, time to start new hobbies, and time to take care of ourselves. We also had time to really reflect on everything that was going on. After reading through all the responses, I've selected 5 quotes that best reflect how the students felt, grew, and what they learned during the pandemic.
I've learned to be more understanding and more thoughtful of other people's situations since I never know who is dealing with what. I have seen myself overcome mental challenges because things have been made extremely hard. I also began to find my voice in personal opinions that I used to keep quiet. From my new voice, I've learned to listen even better.
Hi, I'm Olivia Miller. I'm a freshman at the high school. I'm a YDTF ambassador, and this is YDTF question 3. So we surveyed the 6th through 12th graders in our school district, and we asked them a few questions. Question 3 was, what has the pandemic taught you about other people, and how has it made you look differently at our society? This is a word cloud of question 3, and the words that were used the most are the words that are the biggest. Our first category is division. It has taught me divisibility among the diversity of people. It has taught me that in a difficult situation, our society has lost the common sense of the difference between right and wrong. It makes me question if the people in power are making the right decision for not only the current people, but also the future generations. 54 out of 737 student responses were on division. That's 7% of the student population at the Jersey Shore High School and middle school. Loss and disconnection. This pandemic taught me that some people don't care about what is happening in this world and never will. It makes me look at society differently because now I think of this world as a crazy world and I'll never be able to look at it the same way I saw it before. 18 out of the 737 students had a response based on loss and disconnection. Politics. It taught me that in these times everything isn't perfect and other people went through this too. It made me see that society is very political. 42 out of 737 students had political responses. school. I think that people just followed the guidelines and did what they were supposed to do, that we could have a little more normal time at school, but that is just my opinion. Only 6 students total mentioned school positively or negatively. That's only 1% of the whole survey for question number 3. Positive. It made me realize that I should never take things for granted and hug people a little tighter. 11 students had a positive outlook. All of the other outlooks in question 3 were mostly negative. Others. All the other responses were just people saying nothing or not giving a valid response that answers the question. That's 73 out of 737 students with not valid answers. The remaining 75% of all of the other answers were just answers that didn't fit into any category. My take on question 3. I feel that in these times, people need to stick together instead of falling apart. These are rough times for everyone, and the only way for us to get through this is if we remain as a whole group. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Brianna Corlew. I'm a sophomore at the high school, and I am an officer for a Key Club and a member of YDTF this year. I had question 4, and it was, how has the pandemic experience made you reevaluate your future? Some of the major responses were that it just hadn't. They didn't make them think about their future at all. A lot of people said that they made them think of a different career choice, that they realized the one that they had wasn't for them, or that they wanted to go into the medical field to help people. Or they just really wanted to spend time with friends and family, or maybe they wanted to work harder with sports or school or hobbies. So people said that they really wanted to move or travel. People said that realized that technology is going to be a lot more prominent in the future. People said that they want to get more health conscious or live life to the fullest, and they want to spread kindness. Or some people said that they were worried about college or their education. And people said other stuff, like they didn't really take the question seriously or made things about masks and stuff. Some quotes were, it said, it made me want to spread more kindness. I want to become a surgeon even more than I did before, and I am determined to help people. It made me think that my future will probably be more based around technology. I have completely reevaluated what I want to do as a career because of the time I spent at home. And I've learned that I can't take things or people for granted. My personal experiences with the pandemic made me really think about my future and what I want to do as a career when I leave school and what colleges I want to go to. Thanks for listening to my presentation.
Hello, my name is Lee Springman, and I'm a student at the Jersey Shore High School. I'm a YDTF member and the vice president of Jersey Shore Key Club. And I'm going to share my screen with you and show responses to question 5 of the YDTF survey. So question 5 was given to 737 students. And it asked, many adults in education right now are focused on the idea of learning loss. They think that kids are falling behind academically during the pandemic. What do you want those adults to know about you and your experience during the pandemic? And our answers were divided into 6 categories. Academically, students felt that they gained skills through the pandemic. Non-academic responses included students report random thoughts other than learning loss. Personal responses, may have been associated with friends, family or death, mental health, etc. No impact responses, which was nice to see. Kids weren't impacted at all by learning loss or the pandemic at all. And loss of academics, with that category, students recognized general loss of skills and knowledge. And Wi-Fi concerns, it was kept at a minimal, which is always great, and that was very low. 1 out of 6 students had academic-related responses, these being positive. Some may have said that teachers, they tried their best to teach us the stuff we need. I am learning a lot of new things that I am still being taught and still learning, such as those. 1 out of 4 students had non-academic responses, these being random, not related to any of the other categories. I don't really know. It doesn't matter to me. Know what we're going through just to get it done. Give us time. I want them to know it's not their fault and it isn't easy, such as those. 1 out of 6 students had personal responses. Examples like this may have included, the only really know how our grades are and how we act during the pandemic, but they don't really know what is happening with their personal lives. They aren't really focused on how many kids lost family members or close friends during the pandemic. And then 1 out of 10 students, which was smaller than other categories, but students did respond that they had no impact from the pandemic. And examples like this may have included nothing. I think we learned in different ways, but I don't really feel like I'm behind. And then 2 out of 5 students had concerns for academic loss or response. And this was our largest category. And examples like this included, I know I do better school physically instead of online. It keeps me more focused and pay attention more. It also keeps my grades up the 90s. Some kids said, like this kid, is, well, we lost a lot of learning time in class. It's hard to be independent. That kids need to have paper copy of things. Those responses were included in this category. And then only 1% of students, our smallest category, had a response identifying Wi-Fi as a concern, which is great. Congratulations to the school district for addressing this successfully. I know this was a problem. Now to our conclusion, and things to take note of. We learned that students want to be in school and they want to learn. Students may have lost traditional learning time, but gained other knowledge during the pandemic, and they are proud of it too. Students have lost more significant things than learning, and that should not be ignored or made less important, such as personal responses that we saw in the data. YDTF county representatives, I know in the meeting a couple of weeks ago that when we reviewed all the data, we agreed that our next step should be related to taking care of students' mental health. And final thoughts, I know my personal experience, I have come to appreciate things I've taken for granted in the school setting. The pandemic has made me realize that I miss in-person instruction. Speaking for the senior class, we have lost many school events, experiences, and activities that create memories that would last, forever. And thank you for investing your time into hearing your student body and what I have to say, and acknowledging that learning through life experience is as valuable as traditional learning. Thank you.
Now, I want to make sure that we really, I want to give Jody an opportunity, and Robert, if he would like to jump back on as well to say anything in closing in this. But, when I watched this earlier, I mean, it just, I'm very proud of these students for what they've put together and the work that they've done in this. But it really helps us realize that as a school district, yes, it is part of our mission to academically prepare our kids for their next steps in life. But we have to remember we're dealing with people, not just students. It's the whole child that we are looking at here. And the best way that they learn is when they have these positive experiences. And so many things that they've lost outside of academics is important that we acknowledge that, and what can we do to assist YDTF and the other organizations that want to help address these areas. Robert, is there anything you wanted to say in closing, or Jody?
Sure, I'll add to it. I just wanted to first, again, thank those students for representing the student body so well. They worked really hard on those presentations, and I think they did a very good job on those. And, I think that the YDTF brings up a very good point with our student body. Right now, in one of my classes as a senior, we're doing these memory books. So we're putting together a whole bunch of events from our school careers, from our lives to this point, to really commemorate and to remember a lot of those things in years to come. And after looking at a couple of my classmates' senior books, and including my own, not a whole lot of the memories have to do with academics. There may be one or two who might include a report card or something, but that's not the focal point. But what is being included are pictures from school events and things that the students enjoyed, sports games, dances, club organizations, things like that. Those are the things that these students are going to remember. And, including myself, the things that were really important to us and that we really feel like we missed out on. I don't think many of our students are terribly upset about, how the junior year ended as far as the academics, well, at least my junior year, I should say. But I think we are really upset about losing out on all those important things that are so crucial to our high school lives. And that's not to say that we don't value our education. We know why we're here. those things are definitely important. We understand that, the importance of going, to high school and getting our diplomas and then going on and how that prepares us. But in the long run, it's the minute things like the test scores, the quizzes, the homework. That's not what we remember. We remember the social events and the good things from high school.
Well said, Robert, but I have a hard time believing your mom doesn't frame your report card and put it next to your picture. Jody, is there anything you wanted to say?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity for the students to be heard. They worked very hard collecting data throughout the county and analyzing that data and learning from that data. But remember, YDTF is going to be about initiatives moving forward. So we are already hitting the ground running and preparing for next year to help students feel connected, to help students be able to build and rebuild relationships and find ways to bring hope back and get students mentally back to where we want them to be, really close that gap.
And the students deserve a lot of credit, but so does Jody, in the sense of how well she works with these kids and organizes all this to basically set the path for them and letting them really take off and make something special. So thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
And I would just like to add that I know there's always been all year a lot of conversation about what is school going to look like post-pandemic. And I think that our students and Mrs. English have given you a great picture of what it's going to look like. We're going to do everything we can to help our students get back on track. And that's my report for this evening, Mr. President.
Before we move on, I just want to thank the student body for that presentation. Thank you very much for that.
You're muted, Mr. Allen.
Thank you to all the students that participated, and thank you to Mrs. English. I'm so happy that you were willing to pick up this project and just kind of run with it, and all the work that you put into it as a group. So it gives us a little deeper understanding of what the students are feeling. So thank you very much.
Is that presentation something we can put on our Jersey Shore area webpage or not?
Yeah, believe we can. I'll check with Mrs. English, but I think we could post that video.
Yeah, that would be great. And I guess maybe ask the students that presented on there if it's okay with them too. But okay, thanks.
Okay, at this point, we'll go into courtesy of the floor.
That I actually shared my screen so that anyone out there wishing to be part of courtesy of the floor can see the number, but the number is 570-880-0670. I did have it. It is posted on the website. Also, the conference ID is there. Remember, just like last time we talked about, anyone calling that number and entering that ID will come right into this session so that I'm able to patch them right into the call and eliminate any transfer or sound issues. It also gives us the ability to have multiple callers in the waiting room so nobody calls and gets a busy signal. It is 8:14.
I call for courtesy the floor to be closed.
Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Brungard. Any questions or comments regarding closure of courtesy?
I just would like to point out to the board that while we were waiting, I did call the number and put in the ID, and I could see myself in the waiting room. So it is operational.
Thank you.
Live testing. Okay, if there's no other questions, we have a roll call to approve the motion, please.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Burngard,
Yes.
Ms. Stobler,
Yes.
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Kinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, we'll move on to personnel. We now have items A through H, including the motion that was added earlier.
So moved, Mary.
We have a second.
Second, Nancy.
Thank you, Mrs. Petrosky. And just a question for the solicitor. Do we need to vote on Dr. Dady's contract separately?
He says you do not.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on items A through H?
Actually, I have a comment. I just wanted to verbally state that for letter H for Dr. Dady's contract, I just wanted to make it known that a 5-year length of a contract for any employee is a very long time. I wish the board would have reconsidered the length of that contract. I just wanted to publicly say that.
Thank you, Mrs. Stemler. Okay, hearing no other comments or questions, we have a roll call, Mr. Enders.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Burngard,
Yes.
Ms. Stobler,
Yes.
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Kinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, nothing on curriculum instruction, nothing under building and grounds. So moving on to finance. Same question for the solicitor on F.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good. We have a motion to approve A through F of finance.
So moved,
And
Mary.
we'll vote on F separately. Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. Do I have a second?
Second, Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. Kinley. Any questions on A through F?
I just have, you're voting on A through E first and then voting on
Fine.
F separately?
I'll be voting on F separately, but I'm asking for questions on all of them right now. But we'll vote separately.
So could you clarify the final budget, then give a little more explanation for the public on that? In other words, that final budget includes at this time a no tax increase, I believe. Could somebody explain what that final budget is for those people that have not seen it, maybe?
The proposed final budget that's on the agenda this evening does not have a tax increase. This budget is dollar-wise the same amounts that were presented to you at the last meeting, except for a slight adjustment to real estate taxes solely for a change in assessed value and only for a change in assessed value. This is the standard process that we've been running for several years now. We vote on the proposed final budget at the first meeting of May. It goes on display. It's required to be displayed by school code for 30 days prior to the voting of the final budget, which is currently scheduled for the first meeting of June. So that's what you are voting on this evening, the proposed final budget. This budget can and will change between now and the final budget approval.
Clarification, Ben, will this be posted on the website
Yes,
as well? Okay.
it'll be posted on the website and it'll also be posted at the admin building.
I had a question on how much was the budgetary reserve for this past year?
This past year?
Yeah, for the
2021?
2021. And then how much is it for this year? Like this year is 1.3 million?
Give me
For
one
2022.
Petrosky. So last year, the current 2021 budgetary reserve was just over 2.5 million. The current year's budgetary reserve is at 1.3 million, and the majority, almost all of that budgetary reserve is solely for potential increases in charter school costs.
Okay, and so what was the majority of it going down from the 2.5 to the 1.3?
The decrease in that primarily was due to the passage of the new teacher's contract. Because prior to having a ratified contract, any potential increase in the contract was placed in the budgetary reserve as an unknown expenditure.
But like prior to the past years, so like wasn't the normal budgetary reserve around like $300,000?
Yes. However, if you look further back in history, you'll see in years where the contract was unsettled, there was a budgetary reserve amount placed in there for the unsettled contract as well.
Okay. So generally it is because of like big ticket items that could be anticipated. Or might be anticipated, I guess.
Correct. And also with a change in charter schools, like we've seen, we have been placing the increase in charter schools in budgetary reserve.
Okay, thanks for explaining that.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward on voting on a roll call for items A through E.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Ms. Stobler,
Yes.
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Kinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
9-0.
And we'll have a separate vote now on the proposed general fund budget for 21-22 school year.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Brungard,
Yes.
Ms. Stobler,
Yes.
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Kinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
9-0.
I would like though to jump in here, Mr. Allen, before you move on. And now that, say again, that now that that budget has been, the proposed final budget has been approved, and it needs to be on display for 30 days, and you will vote again at the beginning of June meeting. Typically, your historical action has been at the second May meeting to vote on what you would like to do with tax rates for the coming year. So Mr. Enders and I will need direction from the board on your comfort level with taking that much money out of fund balance or putting in a tax increase for the May 24th agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Ulmer. Moving on to miscellaneous. We have items A, B, and C. I have a motion to approve.
So moved, Mary.
Thank you.
I'll second that, Trees.
Thank you, Mrs. Dobler. Any questions or comments on A, B, and C? Okay, hearing none, can we have a roll call, please, Mr. Enders?
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Berngard,
Yes.
Ms. Dobler,
Yes.
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Kinley,
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Petrosky,
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, old business, anything that anybody wants to add or have added to the next agenda?
I may have some, I just need some clarifications, I guess, on the, excuse me, on Dr. Armour, on the budget. You said this budget that we approved tonight is gonna be on display for 30 days. And then the second meeting in May, is it that time we're gonna discuss whether we want to keep this budget the same or go with a small increase or whatever is what I'm understanding, correct? And then at that time, if we do make a change to this budget that we just okayed tonight, are we gonna have to have that on display for 30 days, that new budget? It won't be
No.
the same as this, maybe?
You
Understand what I'm saying?
Yep, what you passed as the proposed tonight goes on display for 30 days. You can make changes to it before you approve it at the beginning of June. So if regardless of what you do with taking the difference out of fund balance or closing that gap with a tax increase, it doesn't have any bearing on what that proposed budget ends up being in the final. Your tax increase or you're taking money out of fund balance would indicate what you're going to do to fund the remaining part of that budget.
Okay, and that will be discussed at the second meeting in May. So you have direction.
Historically, you have voted on that at the second meeting of May. What Mr. Enders and I are saying is typically you would give us some sort of direction prior to that meeting to say, what do you want that agenda item to look like?
When do we give you that direction? is what I'm getting, that wasn't brought up. Is that on the rest, or is that another part of the agenda tonight?
It is not on the agenda as an item because it's a discussion point. We can discuss it now if the board is interested in having that conversation.
Or we could discuss at the second meeting in May. At that time, you'd still be able to add an addendum to the agenda and vote on it at that time, correct? Give us a little time to think about it.
That you can handle it that way, yes.
Okay.
And on the question of how to submit your suggestions or your thoughts on how to close that deficit, I would ask that you email Dr. Ulmer and Ben separately and include Mary Thomas and myself as copies.
So we're going to discuss this through emails, not publicly.
Excuse me?
We're going to discuss this through emails.
No, I'm asking you to submit your suggestions to Dr. Ulmer and Mr. Enders, so they have at least an idea of what questions or suggestions we're going to have from the board. And then just copy that to Mrs. Thomas and myself. By keeping only 2 board members and the original sender, we're staying within the requirements of Sunshine.
Would you prefer a deadline for those submissions?
Yep,
Mr. Enders.
I'm looking at my calendar. Mr. Allen and I will meet on Wednesday morning of May 19th to set the agenda. So if you would like to email me by the end of the day on the 18th, I could share, and he'll already have seen your answers, but I could share those and we can set the agenda on the 19th. And then you'll see that agenda item on the 20th when the agenda comes to you.
Thank you.
Is that fair?
I think it's more than fair.
I have something for old business too, if we're done with that.
Hey, Mrs. Petrosky.
Okay, I just wanted to know, in light of the new guidelines that are going to be coming out, or that have come out for after May 31st, are we going to talk about, having our board meetings in person?
You can, according to the new regulations as of June 1st, you would be able to have board meetings in the room with public present, but everybody would have to wear a face covering. So that is how the guidelines are reading currently.
So you're not limited to how many can come in, you just have to wear masks?
Correct. Yep, your only limit is the capacity of the room as of June 1st. Yep.
Okay.
And I think the social distancing guideline now is 3 feet for most things. So we would have to make sure we follow that just for.
That would be gone benefit. As of June 1st as well, Mr. Allen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Is that what you would like me to set up for June? I think it's June 14th that we would be back here in person.
Well, I'm not a fan of the mask with talking at a meeting, but I mean, I think it would be good to get back so that the public can be part of the meeting, since that's an option now. But
the recorded version that we had previously would probably be a little muffled is all.
I agree with Mrs. Petrosky. I think that we need to get back to live meetings when we can, as soon as we can.
And we could finalize that at our next meeting, assuming that there are no new changes from the governor of the CDC. Okay. Anything else for old business? Okay, at this time, we'll go into executive session for legal and personnel, after which there'll be no additional business conducted.
Have a good night.
Good night, Robert.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Robert.
For your presentation.
Thanks, Robert.
Good job tonight, Robert.